The crystal spires of New Zealand burned against the star-filled sky. Commander Vexhai watched through the observation deck as another city died below. The Void Swarm's bioships moved like hungry shadows across his homeworld's surface, consuming everything they touched. Metal, stone, flesh. It made no difference to them. They ate it all and grew stronger. His communication officer turned from her station with shaking hands. "Sir, we've lost contact with the southern continent. All defense stations are gone." Vexhai closed his 4 eyes and tried to think. The Zilithian Confederation had never faced anything like this. For 3,000 years they had lived in peace among the stars. They built beautiful cities on garden worlds. They created art and music and studied the mysteries of space. War was something from their ancient past, back when they still lived in caves. The swarm had appeared 6 months ago in the outer systems. At first the reports seemed impossible. Living ships that ate entire planets? Creatures that turned matter into more of themselves? The Confederation's scientists said it had to be a mistake. Nothing like that could exist, but the reports kept coming. World after world went silent. Rescue ships found nothing but empty space where planets used to be. The swarm grew larger with each system they devoured. "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "the orbital platforms are failing. The bioships are adapting to our energy weapons." Vexhai nodded. He had expected this. The Confederation's weapons were designed for precision, not destruction. They could cut through metal with perfect accuracy, but the swarm's creatures healed faster than they could be damaged. Every shot they fired seemed to teach the bioships something new. The main viewer showed the battle raging around New Zealand. Confederation ships fired their best weapons at the massive bioships. The energy beams cut deep wounds into the dark hulls, but the wounds closed within seconds. Green fluid sprayed from the cuts, then hardened into new armor. The creatures learned from every attack. A bioship larger than most space stations descended toward the planet's surface. Its skin rippled and changed as defensive fire struck it. Smaller creatures detached from its hull and flew toward the Confederation ships like angry insects. They moved too fast for the targeting systems to track. "All defensive lines have collapsed," reported the tactical officer. "Admiral Kithara is requesting immediate evacuation." Vexhai looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all young for Zilithians, barely 2 centuries old. Their long, graceful limbs trembled as they worked at their stations. Their pale, blue skin had turned almost white with fear. They had trained for exploration and scientific missions, not war. "How long until the bioships reach the civilian centers?" he asked. 6 hours at most, sir. The creatures are consuming the military installations first, but they're moving toward the cities." Vexhai walked to the communication station. His thin fingers moved over the controls as he opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, this is Commander Vexhai. Begin civilian evacuation immediately. Priority goes to the young and the scientists. We must preserve our knowledge." The responses came back quickly. There weren't enough ships. The bioships were jamming most communication channels. The evacuation points were under attack. Everything was falling apart. He looked at the long-range sensors. 3 more swarm fleets were approaching through hyperspace. Each one was larger than the force currently destroying his homeworld. Soon there would be nothing left of the Confederation except empty space and drifting debris. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Science Council," his communication officer said. "They want to know if we've made contact with other species for help." Other species. The Confederation had found dozens of intelligent races during their expansion into space. Most were friendly enough to trade with. A few shared scientific knowledge. But none were warriors. The galaxy seemed full of civilizations like theirs, peaceful, curious, and completely unprepared for something like the swarm. "Open a channel to all known frequencies," Vexhai ordered. "All bands, all languages we have on record." His crew looked at him with confusion. "Sir, what are your orders?" Vexhai had never recorded a distress call before. The words felt strange in his mouth. "This is Commander Vexhai of the Zilithian Confederation Defense Fleet. We are under attack by an unknown hostile force. Our worlds are being consumed by creatures we cannot stop. Any species receiving this message, we beg for your assistance. We will share all our scientific knowledge in exchange for military aid. Please, if anyone can hear this, help us." He paused and looked at his crew. They stared back with hope in their eyes. It was probably false hope, but it was all they had left. "Repeat the message on all frequencies," he continued. "Send our star charts and technical specifications. Make it clear that we're offering everything we have in exchange for help against the swarm." The message went out across space at light speed, then faster through the hyperspace relay networks. It would reach the nearest civilizations in days, the farthest in weeks. Whether anyone would answer was another question entirely. Hours passed. New Zealoth continued to burn. The bioships had reached the major cities and were consuming them street by street. Millions of Zilithians died every hour, their bodies converted into more swarm creatures. The planet's beautiful crystal spires collapsed into piles of organic matter that fed the growing fleet. Any responses to the distress call? Vex-High asked. Some acknowledgements, sir. The Corvani Federation says they're sorry, but cannot spare ships. The Ethereal Collective is offering to preserve our cultural records if we can transmit them. The Trade Alliance suggests we try to negotiate with the creatures. Vex-High almost laughed. Negotiate with the swarm? The creatures didn't communicate. They only consumed. They were like a natural disaster given intelligence and purpose. More hours went by. More worlds fell silent. The swarm's advance seemed unstoppable. They had consumed 4 entire star systems and were moving toward the Confederation's core worlds. Soon they would reach the capital planet where billions of Zilithians lived. Sir, we're receiving an unusual transmission, the communication officer reported. It's coming from outside our normal contact range. The signal is very strong, but very crude. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled with static, then cleared. A strange voice spoke in heavily accented Galactic Standard. This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your distress call. Hang tight, cavalry's coming. Vex-High blinked all 4 eyes. Terran? I don't have that species in our databases. His science officer worked quickly at her station. Sir, I'm showing no records of any Terran civilization. The transmission is coming from a quarantined sector. Our star charts mark that area as forbidden space. Forbidden by whom? Unknown, sir. The warnings are in over 30 languages, most of which we don't recognize. The basic message seems to be, dangerous species, do not approach. Vex-High felt a chill run down his spine. They had called for help from anyone who would listen. Now something was answering from the forbidden zones of space. Something dangerous enough that dozens of species had marked their territory with warning signs. Sir, the Terrans are requesting our tactical situation and fleet composition. They want to coordinate battle plans. He looked at the burning planet, below and the bioships consuming his civilization. The Confederation was doomed whether they got help or not. At least this way, they might take some of the swarm with them. Send them everything, Vex-High ordered. All our data on the swarm, our remaining forces, our defensive positions. If they want to fight, give them the information they need. As the transmission went out, he wondered what kind of species lived in the forbidden sectors. What made them so dangerous that the rest of the galaxy avoided them? And why were they willing to help when no one else would? Soon, he would find out. The cavalry was coming from the darkness between stars, and Vex-High wasn't sure if that was salvation or something far worse. 3 days after sending their desperate message into space, the Zilithian long-range sensors detected something approaching their outer colonies. The readings made no sense to the sensor operators. The energy signatures were massive, but crude, like someone had built starships out of raw metal and powered them with controlled explosions. Admiral Kythera stood in the command center of the remaining defense fleet, studying the strange readings. Her tall, elegant frame was hunched with exhaustion. The swarm had consumed 2 more worlds while they waited for help that might never come. How many ships? She asked her sensor operator. Difficult to determine, Admiral. The energy signatures are interfering with each other. At least 50 large vessels, possibly more. They're moving faster than anything in our databases. Kythera frowned. The approaching fleet was larger than what remained of the entire Confederation Defense Force. If these were more swarm bioships, the war was over. But the energy patterns were wrong for biological vessels. These looked like metal ships with fusion reactors and electromagnetic drives. Any response to our hailing attempts? Not yet, Admiral. Wait. We're receiving a transmission now. The main speakers crackled to life. The voice that emerged spoke Galactic Standard with a strange accent and odd word choices. Zilithian Defense. Fleet, this is Admiral Chen aboard the UES Retribution. We're here about your bug problem. Request tactical briefing and coordinate data for joint operations. Kythera blinked her 4 eyes. Bug problem? Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Kythera of the Zilithian Confederation. Please identify your species and home system. We have no record of your civilization in our databases. A pause, then a different voice, younger and more informal. Admiral, this is Captain Rodriguez. We're from Earth Sol System. Heard you folks were having trouble with some kind of space locusts. We've dealt with invasive species before. The Zilithian crew exchanged confused looks. Earth? Sol System? These names meant nothing to them. Admiral Kythara gestured to her intelligence officer. Sir, the officer whispered, our star charts show the Sol System in Sector 7 Alpha. It's marked as quarantine space, multiple warning, beacons in dozens of languages. The basic translation says, Deathworld species, avoid contact. Kythara felt her blood chill. Deathworld species. She had heard the term before in ancient academic papers. Theoretical classifications for civilizations that evolved on hostile planets. Worlds with deadly weather, dangerous creatures, and constant natural disasters. Most xenobiologists agreed that intelligent life couldn't develop under such conditions. Admiral Chen, she said carefully, we appreciate your response to our distress call. However, we should inform you that the hostile force is extremely dangerous. They have consumed entire planets and show no signs of communication or negotiation. Admiral Chen's laughter came through the speakers, a sound that made several Zilithians step back from their consoles. Admiral, we've read your data transmission. These swarm things remind me of something we dealt with back home. Had a species called army ants that would strip entire forests bare. The trick is understanding their behavior patterns. Sir, interrupted another human voice. Long-range sensors are picking up bioship formations 3 systems out. Looks like they're massing for another push. Copy that, Lieutenant. Admiral Kythara, we're going to need some information from you. What's your fleet's combat capability? The question made Kythara uncomfortable. We have 43 remaining vessels, mostly science ships with defensive armaments. Our weapons are designed for precision work, not military engagement. Silence on the channel. Then Admiral Chen's voice returned, more serious now. Ma'am, with respect, how exactly were you planning to fight off an invasion with science equipment? We had hoped to find a technological solution, perhaps a frequency that would disrupt their biological systems, or a chemical compound that would prove toxic to them. More silence. When the humans spoke again, their tone had changed completely. Admiral, we're transmitting our fleet specifications for coordination purposes. Fair warning. Our equipment is designed for a different kind of warfare. The data package that arrived made the Zilithian tactical officers gasp. The human ships mounted weapons called fusion torpedoes and kinetic kill vehicles. Their defensive systems included something called reactive armor that apparently exploded when hit. The largest ship, the UES Retribution, carried enough firepower to crack open a small moon. These weapon specifications, Kythara said slowly, they seem designed for planetary destruction. Well, yes, ma'am. Sometimes you need to break things to protect what matters. Don't worry, we're not planning to blow up any of your worlds, just the ones the bugs have already eaten. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through again. Admiral, our xenobiology team has been analyzing your data on the swarm. These things operate on simple principles. Consume, reproduce, expand. Back on Earth, we call that an invasive species event. Standard protocol is aggressive containment, followed by systematic extermination. The casual way the humans discussed extermination made Kythara's skin crawl. Captain, surely there must be alternatives to total destruction. Perhaps we could drive them away, or find uninhabited systems they could consume instead. Ma'am, Admiral Chen's voice cut in. These creatures have already killed billions of your people. They've consumed entire planets. There's no negotiating with something that sees every other living thing as food. Sometimes the only solution is to be meaner than the problem you're facing. On her tactical display, Kythara watched the human fleet approach their outer defense lines. The ships looked wrong compared to Confederation vessels. Where Zilithian ships were elegant curves and crystal spires, the human ships were blocky, angular things covered in weapon mounts and sensor arrays. They looked like they had been built for war and nothing else. Admiral, her communication officer whispered, I'm detecting multiple channels of human chatter. They're discussing something called acceptable loss ratios and scorched earth protocols. Kythara listened to the intercepted communications with growing horror. The humans spoke about warfare like Zilithians discussed farming techniques. They had terms for every type of destruction, plans for every possible scenario, and backup plans for their backup plans. Admiral Chen, may I ask how your species developed such extensive military capabilities? Another pause, then Admiral Chen's voice returned with what sounded like amusement. Ma'am, We've been fighting wars since before we discovered fire. Had 2 global conflicts in the last century alone. Nuclear weapons, chemical warfare, biological agents. We've tried everything at least once. When you spend your whole evolutionary history trying to kill each other, you get good at it. The humans were approaching the edge of Zilithian space now. Their formation was tight and disciplined like a school of predatory fish moving through dark water. Every ship maintained perfect spacing and kept weapons trained on potential threat vectors. "Sir," reported the sensor operator, "the human fleet is requesting permission to establish forward operating bases in our outer systems. They want to set up supply lines and communication relays." Forward operating bases. Supply lines. The humans were planning for a long campaign, not a single battle. They had come prepared for total war against the swarm. "Admiral Chen, what are your tactical intentions regarding the hostile forces?" "Simple, Admiral. We're going to hunt them down and kill every last one. Standard pest control procedures. Find their breeding sites, cut off their food supply, and exterminate the population. We've brought everything we need for a complete cleansing operation." Kithara looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They were all staring at the communication station with expressions of shock and growing fear. The humans talked about extermination like it was routine maintenance. They discussed the deaths of trillions of creatures without a trace of emotion. Outside, the command center windows, she could see the first human ships arriving at their defensive positions. They moved through space like hunting animals, weapons swiveling to track potential targets. Their hulls were scarred with battle damage from previous conflicts, but they showed no signs of weakness or hesitation. The Zilithian Confederation had called for help from anyone who would answer. Now help was arriving in the form of a species that had turned warfare into an art form. Admiral Kithara watched the human fleet take up positions around her remaining worlds and wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. The humans were here to save them from the swarm. But who would save them from their saviors? The human fleet emerged from hyperspace like a pack of hungry wolves. Admiral Kithara watched from the bridge of her flagship as 57 warships materialized in perfect battle formation. Each vessel was a dark wedge of metal and weaponry, built for destruction rather than beauty. Scarred hulls told stories of previous battles, and weapon ports glowed with barely contained energy. The lead ship, UES Retribution, was larger than anything in the Zilithian fleet. Its hull stretched for nearly 2 kilometers and bristled with gun turrets, missile tubes, and sensor arrays. Smaller escort ships flanked it like loyal hounds, their own weapons tracking across local space for potential threats. "Admiral, her communication officer reported, the humans are requesting a tactical briefing. Admiral Chen wants to meet with you directly." "Very well. Establish a secure channel." Admiral Chen's image appeared on the main viewer. He was older than Kithara had expected, with gray hair and scars across his weathered face. His uniform was simple but functional, designed for combat rather than ceremony. Behind him she could see the bridge of his warship, all dark metal and glowing displays showing weapon status and tactical information. "Admiral Kithara," Chen said with a slight nod, "thank you for the intelligence data. My staff has been analyzing the swarm's behavior patterns. We have some questions." "Of course, Admiral. How may we assist?" "First, these bioships. Do they show any pack hierarchy? Alpha specimens that control smaller units?" The question caught Kithara off guard. She had never thought of the swarm in terms of pack behavior. We're not certain. The creatures seem to act independently, but with coordination." "Hive mind. Then, that's actually better for our purposes. Cut off the head and the body dies." Chen turned to someone off-screen. "Commander Park, update the tactical database. Hive mind classification confirmed." Kithara felt a chill at the casual way he discussed killing what might be an intelligent species. "Admiral, surely you don't mean to destroy all of them. Perhaps some could be captured for study." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Ma'am, these things have eaten entire planets full of your people. In human military doctrine, that's called genocide. Our response is proportional." Before she could respond, alarms started sounding throughout the Zilithian command center. "Admiral," her sensor operator called out, "swarm bioships emerging from hyperspace. Multiple contacts bearing directly for the colony world of Preth Mal." The tactical display showed 16 massive bioships dropping out of hyperspace near the agricultural world. Each one was the size of a city, their dark hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Smaller creatures swarmed around them like angry insects. Confirmed contacts. Admiral Chen's voice came through the speakers. We count 16 heavy bioships and approximately 200 escort organisms. Admiral Kithara, recommend you pull your ships back to defensive positions. Admiral, there are 3 million civilians on Prethmal. We cannot abandon them. We're not abandoning anyone, ma'am. We're about to give you a demonstration of human military capability. All Terran ships. This is Admiral Chen. Execute operation. Pest control. Rules of engagement are weapons-free, no survivors. The human fleet moved with frightening precision. Within seconds, they had reformed into attack formations and were accelerating toward the swarm bioships. Their approach was nothing like Zilithian naval tactics. Instead of maintaining safe distances and using long-range weapons, they were driving straight into close combat. Sir, Kithara's tactical officer whispered, the human ships are entering optimal range for the bioship's defensive systems. Those creatures can dissolve metal hulls with their bioacids. As if to prove the point, the swarm bioships began spraying clouds of green liquid toward the approaching human fleet. The deadly acid had destroyed dozens of Zilithian ships in previous encounters, eating through their crystalline hulls in seconds. The humans didn't even slow down. Impact in 15 seconds, reported Admiral Chen's tactical officer. All ships report reactive armor armed and ready. The acid struck the human ships and immediately began eating into their hulls. But instead of penetrating, the affected armor sections exploded outward, throwing the corrosive material away from the ships. New armor plates slid into position, while the humans continued their attack run. Explosive armor, Admiral Chen explained calmly. The outer layer detonates on contact with hostile substances. Behind that we have ceramic composites, metallic foam, and finally titanium steel alloy. Takes more than spacebug spit to get through human battle armor. The human ships opened fire at point-blank range. Their weapons weren't the precise energy beams that Zilithians used, but massive kinetic projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. The tungsten rods punched through bioship hulls like bullets through paper, creating massive wounds that didn't heal. Nuclear torpedoes armed and ready, came another human voice. Target the largest bioship for maximum psychological impact. Belay that order, Admiral Chen replied. Save the nuclear weapons for their breeding ships. Use conventional explosives on these scouts. Nuclear weapons. Kithara realized with horror that the humans had brought planet-killing devices to the battle. They spoke about using them as casually as she might discuss scientific equipment. The swarm bioships tried to adapt to the human attacks, but they couldn't heal fast enough. The kinetic weapons created wounds faster than the creatures could regenerate. Green blood sprayed into space as the massive organisms writhed in pain and fury. Boarding torpedoes away, reported a human captain. Marines are en route to bioship, primary. Boarding torpedoes? Kithara asked. Armored pods filled with human soldiers. Admiral Chen explained. Sometimes you need to get inside the enemy to finish the job properly. Our Marines are equipped for hostile environment operations. On her tactical display, Kithara watched as human soldiers actually entered the wounded bioships. The idea was insane. The interiors of those creatures were filled with corrosive fluids, poisonous gases, and aggressive antibody organisms. Nothing could survive inside a swarm bioship. Marine Team Alpha reporting from inside Target 1, came a crackling. Hostile environment confirmed. Switching to hardened environmental suits, beginning search for vital organs. The human soldiers were fighting inside living starships, hunting for biological weak points while surrounded by an environment that would kill most species instantly. Their casual radio chatter suggested they found this normal. Contact with antibody organisms, reported another Marine. Engaging with flamethrowers and explosive charges. These things really don't like phosphorus rounds. Kithara watched in fascination and growing horror as the human Marines systematically destroyed the bioships from within. They used weapons that seemed designed specifically for biological targets. Fire, acid, explosive charges that turned living tissue into vapor. They weren't just fighting the swarm, they were exterminating it with surgical precision. One by one, the massive bioships stopped moving. Their bioluminescent patterns flickered and died as human explosives destroyed their nervous systems. The escort organisms fled back into hyperspace, abandoning their dead motherships to the human fleet. Threat neutralized, Admiral Chen reported. Total enemy casualties, 16 heavy bioships destroyed, approximately 150 smaller. Organisms eliminated or driven off. Human casualties, 3 minor injuries, no fatalities. 3 minor injuries. The humans had just destroyed a swarm fleet that could have consumed an entire planet, and they had barely been scratched. The Zilithians had lost dozens of ships to similar forces. Admiral Chen, Kithara said carefully, your combat effectiveness is impressive. May I ask how your species developed such capabilities? Practice, mostly. Humans have been killing things since we first picked up sharp sticks. We got good at it because everything on our homeworld was trying to kill us first. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, other humans, you name it, we fought it. And you brought these skills to space warfare. Had to. Space is hostile enough without alien species trying to eat you. Better to be prepared for the worst-case scenario. Admiral Chen's image flickered as he turned to address his crew. All ships, begin salvage operations. I want samples of bioship, tissue, weapons analysis, and behavioral data. Science teams are to determine reproductive cycles and breeding requirements. Sir, came a response. Xenobiology is reporting some interesting findings. These organisms show signs of hive mind intelligence with distributed processing centers. Recommend targeting neural clusters in future engagements. The humans were already analyzing their dead enemies, learning how to kill them more efficiently. They approached warfare like Zilithians approached scientific research, methodically, thoroughly, and with clear objectives. Admiral Kithara, Admiral Chen said, returning his attention to the communication channel. We're going to need staging areas for extended operations. The swarm has multiple fleets throughout this region. Eliminating them will require a systematic campaign, extended operations. The humans weren't planning to leave after one battle. They were here to stay until every last swarm organism was dead. Admiral Kithara looked at her crew and saw her own fears reflected in their faces. The war against the Void Swarm lasted 3 months, but Admiral Kithara knew within the first week that the humans had already won. The systematic efficiency with which they hunted and destroyed the bioships was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. Where the Zilithian forces had fought defensive battles and hoped to survive, the humans waged total war with the patience of born predators. Commander Vexhai stood beside her in the command center, watching the latest tactical reports. The humans had established forward operating bases throughout the former swarm territory, turning each liberated system into a fortress world. Their supply lines stretched across dozens of star systems, all protected by automated defense platforms that could vaporize incoming threats before they got within sensor range. Admiral, Vexhai said quietly, I'm receiving reports from our liaison officers with the human fleet. The things they're telling me, I'm not sure I believe them. What kind of reports? The humans have developed weapons specifically designed to counter swarm biology, chemical agents that cause the bioships to digest themselves, sonic weapons that disrupt their nervous systems. They've even captured living specimens and are experimenting on them. Kithara felt her stomach turn. Experimenting on living creatures was forbidden by every civilized law in the galaxy. Have you confirmed these reports? I tried to, but the humans have classified most of their research. What I did see... Vexhai paused, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly. They have laboratories full of swarm tissue samples. They're growing bioship organs in containers, studying how they function, learning how to cause maximum damage. One of their scientists told me they've identified 17 different ways to cause fatal system cascades in swarm organisms. Through the main viewport, Kithara could see human ships patrolling the outer system. They moved in perfect formation, sensors constantly sweeping for any sign of swarm activity. Their presence should have made her feel safe, but instead she felt like prey being stalked by apex predators. Sir, her communication officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from Captain Rodriguez. He's requesting permission to brief us on something called Operation Deep Clean. Kithara nodded. Captain Rodriguez appeared on the main screen, his young face marked by the same casual confidence that all the humans seemed to share. Behind him, she could see what looked like a tactical planning room with star charts and biological diagrams covering every surface. Admiral Kithara, Commander Vexhai, Rodriguez said with a slight smile. Good news. We've located the primary swarm breeding facilities. Turns out these things have been using a series of dead worlds in the Kepler void as nurseries. We're planning a final offensive to eliminate their reproductive capacity. Captain, what does this operation entail? Kithara asked. Standard sterilization protocol. We go in with maximum force, destroy all biological matter, and render the worlds uninhabitable for any carbon-based life. Should take about a week to complete. The casual way he discussed making entire worlds uninhabitable sent chills through the Zilithian bridge crew. Captain, surely such extreme measures aren't necessary. If you could capture the breeding facilities intact, they might provide valuable scientific data. Rodriguez's smile faded slightly. Ma'am, With respect, these things nearly wiped out your entire civilization. Our xenobiology teams have confirmed that the swarm operates on exponential reproduction cycles. If even a single breeding pair survives, they could repopulate within a few years. Complete extermination is the only viable option. Vexhai stepped forward. Captain, how exactly do your people plan to render entire worlds uninhabitable? Well, that depends on the specific planetary conditions. For the gas giants, we'll seed the atmospheres with engineered viruses that will break down any organic compounds. For the rocky planets, we're planning controlled nuclear bombardment to create radiation zones that will prevent biological activity for several thousand years. Nuclear bombardment. The humans were planning to turn entire star systems into radioactive wastelands to ensure that nothing could ever live there again. The scale of destruction they were contemplating was beyond anything in Zilithian experience. Captain, Kythera said slowly, your species seems remarkably comfortable with large-scale destruction. May I ask why? Rodriguez's expression became more serious. Admiral, humans have been dealing with extinction-level threats since we first developed intelligence. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, global pandemics. We've survived everything our homeworld could throw at us. When we finally reached space, we discovered that the universe was even more dangerous than Earth. So we adapted. Adapted how? We became better predators than anything we were likely to encounter. Human military doctrine is based on a simple principle. Any threat that can't be reasoned with must be eliminated completely. We've learned that leaving enemies half dead is a good way to end up completely dead. The transmission ended, leaving the Zilithian bridge in uncomfortable silence. Admiral Kythera looked at the tactical displays showing human ships throughout their territory. What had started as a rescue mission was beginning to look like an occupation. Sir, the communication officer said quietly, I'm also receiving reports from our civilian populations. The humans have been requesting detailed information about our industrial capabilities, resource extraction methods, and population centers. They say it's for coordination purposes. Coordination purposes. Kythera had heard similar phrases before during her academy studies of ancient warfare. Occupying armies always needed detailed information about the territories they controlled. Over the following weeks, the reports from human-occupied systems became increasingly disturbing. Human advisors had been assigned to Zilithian government facilities. Human technical specialists were studying Zilithian technology and industrial processes. Human security teams were establishing permanent bases on every liberated world. The most troubling reports came from the front lines, where human soldiers were fighting the remaining swarm forces. The humans had developed tactics that bordered on biological warfare. They used captured swarm organisms as weapons against other swarm forces. They released engineered plagues that caused bioships to turn on each other. They had learned to think like the enemy they were fighting, and in doing so, had become something just as terrifying. Admiral, Vexhai said during one of their private meetings, I've been reviewing the human fleet's operational parameters. Do you know how many ships they originally brought to our aid? 57 vessels, according to their initial reports. That was 3 months ago. Current sensor readings show over 200 human ships in our territory. They've been bringing in reinforcements, supply vessels, construction ships, and something they call colonization support craft. Colonization support craft. The humans weren't just planning to defeat the swarm and leave. They were planning to stay permanently. Admiral Kythera requested a meeting with Admiral Chen to discuss the human presence in Zilithian space. When his image appeared on the screen, she noticed that his uniform had changed. Instead of the simple military dress she remembered, he now wore insignia indicating administrative authority. Admiral Chen, I wanted to thank you again for your assistance against the swarm. However, some of my advisors are concerned about the continued human presence in our territory. Admiral Chen's expression was polite but firm. Admiral Kythera, I understand your concerns, but the threat hasn't been completely eliminated yet. Our intelligence indicates several swarm remnants scattered throughout this region. It would be irresponsible to withdraw before the job is finished. How long do you estimate complete elimination will require? Difficult to say. Could be months, could be years. These kinds of organisms can remain dormant for extended periods, then emerge. When conditions are favorable, we'll need to maintain monitoring stations and rapid response forces for the foreseeable future. The foreseeable future. Admiral Kythera realized that the humans had never planned to leave. They had answered the Zilithian distress call not as temporary allies but as permanent protectors. And protectors, she was learning, were not very different from conquerors. Admiral Chen, the Zilithian government would like to discuss the terms of our ongoing relationship. Of course, I'll have my diplomatic staff arrange a series of meetings. I'm sure we can work out arrangements that benefit both our species. After all, the galaxy is a dangerous place. It's better to have strong allies than to face the unknown alone. As the transmission ended, Admiral Kithara looked out at the human ships patrolling around her homeworld. They had saved the Zilithian Confederation from extinction, but the price of that salvation was becoming clear. The humans were here to stay, and they had the firepower to ensure that no one could force them to leave. The Void Swarm had wanted to consume the Zilithians. The humans wanted something far more complex and potentially more dangerous. They wanted to integrate them into humanity's growing sphere of influence. The Zilithians had traded one form of extinction for another, and they were only beginning to understand what that meant. 6 months after the last swarm bioship had been destroyed, Admiral Kithara stood in what used to be her command center and watched human technicians install new communication equipment. The devices were more advanced than anything in the Zilithian fleet, but they also transmitted everything back to human command centers. Privacy, she was learning, was not something the humans considered important. Admiral, Commander Vexahai approached with a datapad in his hands. The final casualty, reports from the war. Kithara took the pad and read through the numbers. The Void Swarm had been completely eliminated. Every bioship destroyed, every breeding facility sterilized, every trace of their existence wiped from the galaxy. It was the most complete military victory in recorded history. The cost had been equally complete. 17 Zilithian worlds had been consumed before the humans arrived. Another 8 had been so badly damaged during the fighting that they were no longer habitable. Nearly 4 billion Zilithians had died, along with countless trillions of swarm organisms. But the Zilithian Confederation still existed. Their remaining worlds were safe, their people were alive, and their civilization would continue. They owed their survival entirely to the humans. Sir, Vexhai said quietly. Ambassador Chen is here for the scheduled meeting. Ambassador Chen. Not Admiral Chen anymore, but Ambassador Chen, representing the newly established human colonial administration. The change in titles told the entire story of what had happened to Zilithian independence. The human diplomat entered the command center with the same confident stride that his military predecessors had shown. He was younger than Admiral Chen, but his eyes held the same calculating intelligence that made Kithara uncomfortable. Admiral Kithara, Commander Vexhai, he said with a polite nod. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I have some proposals from the colonial administration that I think you'll find beneficial. Colonial administration. The humans didn't even pretend that the Zilithians were still fully independent. Everything was discussed in terms of human administrative policies and colonial development programs. Ambassador, what can we do for you? Several items on today's agenda. First, we'd like to expand the cultural exchange program. Human universities are interested in Zilithian scientific methods, and we have educational opportunities that might benefit your young people. Cultural exchange. Kithara had seen the preliminary reports from the program. Zilithian scientists were being invited to study at human institutions, where they learned human approaches to research and development. Many of them returned home with new ideas about industrial efficiency and resource extraction methods. Ideas that happened to align with human economic interests. Second, Ambassador Chen continued, we're proposing a mutual defense treaty. The galaxy is full of potential threats, and our combined fleets would be more effective than either force operating alone. Mutual defense. The humans had already established permanent military bases throughout Zilithian space. Their ships patrolled every system. Their soldiers guarded every important facility, and their weapons platforms controlled all major hyperspace routes. The treaty would simply make official what was already reality. Third, we'd like to discuss economic integration. Human trade networks could provide new markets for Zilithian products, while human industrial methods could increase your manufacturing capacity. Economic integration meant that Zilithian resources would flow toward human colonies, while Zilithian manufacturing would be reorganized to produce goods that humans needed. The Zilithians would become a supplier and customer for the human economy, dependent on human markets and unable to function independently. Ambassador, Kithara said carefully, these proposals seem to assume a very close relationship between our species. What happens if the Zilithian government prefers to maintain more independence? Ambassador Chen's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Admiral, I think you misunderstand the situation. These aren't really proposals. They're notifications of policies that have already been implemented. The defense treaty is necessary because we've identified potential threats to this region. The economic integration is happening because your current industrial base can't support your population without outside assistance. The cultural exchange is important because your people need to understand how the galaxy actually works. The casual way he dismissed Zilithian sovereignty made Vexhai step forward angrily. Ambassador, the Zilithian Confederation is a free and independent government. We have the right to determine our own policies. Commander, with respect, the Zilithian Confederation exists because human forces prevented your extinction. Your independence is a privilege that we're happy to support, as long as it doesn't interfere with regional security or economic stability. Regional security, economic stability. The humans had wrapped their occupation in diplomatic language, but the meaning was clear. The Zilithians could govern themselves as long as they governed themselves the way the humans wanted. What if we refuse these arrangements? Kithara asked. Ambassador Chen's expression became more serious. Admiral, I hope it won't come to that, but if the Zilithian government makes decisions that threaten regional stability, we'll have to take appropriate measures. We have a responsibility to protect all the civilizations in this sector, including protecting them from poor decision-making. Appropriate measures. The humans had enough firepower in the system to reduce every Zilithian world to radioactive ash within hours. They didn't need to threaten violence directly. Everyone in the room understood the balance of power. After Ambassador Chen left, Kithara and Vexhai stood in silence for several minutes. Through the viewports they could see human ships maintaining their eternal patrol routes around New Zelith. The same ships that had saved their civilization were now the chains that bound it. Sir, Vexhai said finally, do you think we made the right choice? Calling for help, I mean. Kithara considered the question. The swarm would have consumed every Zilithian world within a year. Every man, woman, and child of their species would have died, converted into more bioship mass for the endless hunger of the hive. At least now Zilithian civilization still existed. Their children would grow up even if they grew up under human oversight. We survived, she said finally. That has to count for something. But even as she said it, Kithara wondered if survival was worth the price they had paid. The humans treated them kindly enough, like beloved pets or prized specimens in a vast collection. They provided security, economic opportunities, and educational programs. They protected Zilithian interests as long as those interests aligned with human goals. In the months that followed, the integration accelerated. Young Zilithians joined human universities and returned with human ideas about efficiency and progress. Zilithian industries were restructured according to human management principles. Zilithian military forces were integrated into human defensive networks using human weapons and following human tactical doctrines. The changes weren't necessarily bad. Crime rates dropped to almost zero under human security systems. Industrial output increased dramatically with human technical assistance. Educational programs gave young Zilithians opportunities they never would have had before. But they were no longer the same species that had built crystal spires reaching toward the stars. They were becoming something new. A junior partner in the human colonial empire, valued for their scientific talents and grateful for human protection. Commander Vexhai found Admiral Kithara in the observation lounge one evening, staring out at the stars. The old communication equipment was still there, the same device they had used to broadcast their desperate plea for help all those months ago. Any regrets, Admiral? He asked. Kithara looked at the communication array and remembered the moment when everything had changed. The moment when they had reached out into the darkness and summoned something that was more dangerous than the enemy they faced. The Confederation prayed for salvation, she said quietly. We should have been more specific about what kind of salvation we wanted, and from whom. The human patrol ships continued their endless circuits around Zilithian space, protecting worlds that were no longer truly Zilithian. The crystal spires of New Zelith still reached toward the stars, but now they were crowned with human communication arrays and defensive platforms. The Void Swarm had wanted to consume them completely. The humans had settled for something more subtle and ultimately more effective. They had made the Zilithians grateful to be consumed. The extinction of the Zilithian Confederation as an independent civilization was just as complete as if the bioships had devoured every world, but it came wrapped in friendship treaties and economic development programs. Admiral Kithara turned away from the viewport and walked back toward her quarters. Outside, the human ships maintained their vigil, protecting their newest colonial territory from any threats that might emerge from the darkness between stars. The Zilithians were safe now, safer than they had ever been in their entire history. They just weren't free anymore. And perhaps, Kithara thought as she listened to human voices discussing patrol schedules and defensive preparations, freedom had always been a luxury that species like theirs couldn't afford in a galaxy full of predators.